pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people and elders past and present. I just want to take a moment to give an extra heartfelt thank you to Auntie Violet, one of the most powerful speakers I've ever heard in all of my travels. It's a great honour to be here with you. And thank you to the school for inviting me to speak about what is undoubtedly the most important opportunity that we have in this term of Parliament. We have, as Auntie Violet said, we have a government that is finally listening to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people, and it's an exciting thing. The Uluru Statement from the Heart was made 5 years ago, May 26, 2017, and it was almost immediately dismissed by the Turnbull government. And I'm going to talk about how the Uluru Statement came to be to help you understand just how disrespectful that dismissal was, but also to understand the great legitimacy behind the Uluru Statement and the power that it has, and why the proposals are so important for us to accept and to achieve. We've always been here, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. We've been here with our families and our culture. It's the longest continuous civilization on the planet. And when colonisation began, we know that genocide happened. More and more Australians are accepting this truth. The forced assimilation, all of those things that have torn the fabric of a wonderful and advanced peoples. I mean, you've all seen today the IATSIS map, right? And all of those hundreds of First Nations. And what's really interesting is that there's also hundreds of languages, very unique languages. And if there's any indication of what an advanced society Aboriginal people had, it's that these languages were able to evolve so close to each other, that we understood what land we belonged to. Not necessarily owned, but that we belonged to and that we were carers of, or we were custodians of. And it indicates that we were a people that understood dispute resolution as well. Of course, as human beings, there was violence, that's human. But we had an advanced society that ensured that we cared for country and each other. We've made many statements and petitions. The Uluru Statement is just one of many. I'll just take through a few. In the 1930s, there was a petition led by leaders such as William Cooper. In 1963, there was the Yirrkala Bark petitions, trying to protect country, the Yolngu people, from a mine. In 1972, there was a Larrakia petition to the Queen. The one in the 30s was to the King. The Yolngu people wrote theirs to the Federal Parliament. 1988, the Barunga Statement. There's some things in common for all of these statements and petitions, including the Uluru Statement. It's that every one of them was dismissed and ignored by the powers that be. And every one of them called for a voice in some iteration, political representation, all ignored. So some of the lessons that we thought about when we made the Uluru Statement, that's one of the lessons that went into the Uluru Statement, that every time we write a petition or a statement, those with the power to do something just ignore it. And the Uluru Statement is written to the Australian people. That's how we got around that. And in droves, the Australian people have supported it and helped us to not take no for an answer. The other important lesson from the history of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander struggle that goes into the Uluru Statement is that we have established voices, representative bodies. In the 1920s, The Australian Aboriginal Progressive Association was established. A fellow Wharfie, a Warramai man, Fred Maynard, was a leader of that. And it was established in 1924 and it disappeared from the public eye by 1928. The powers that the Protection Board had, the Chief Protector, so-called Protector, were used to intimidate the leaders to silence that voice. They could steal our children legally. They could decide where we live. They could hold our wages, and often they kept them. They could direct us to work without pay or slavery. And so these are the things that they used to destroy that voice. There was the NAC, the NACC, the Aboriginal Advancement League, FCATSI, and from the Urunga Statement, which called for a national treaty and a voice, of which the treaty promise was broken. But Bob Hawke was the Prime Minister then, and he did deliver on a voice, and he established ATSIC to the vehement opposition of John Howard, who was the opposition leader. And ATSIC too was silenced. When John Howard came into power, he amplified the problems because ATSIC had some problems, like all human organisations will have. Like all human organisations would have. But he amplified those problems to repeal the legislation in 2005 and silence us. And so what did we see after 2005? We saw the Northern Territory intervention. The Australian Army rolled into Aboriginal communities in the Northern Territory against its most vulnerable citizens. We saw a Prime Minister basically announce that our children needed protection from their fathers because we were Aboriginal. And it took us back decades. Lots of progress that we had achieved were taken backwards. Didn't help anyone. We saw hundreds of millions of dollars cut from services to remote Aboriginal communities that led to the WA community closures matter. We saw money that was meant for Indigenous benefit given to associations like the Fishermen's Association to fight against land rights. You see, a lesson here is that in the absence of a voice, a way for a people to come together and coherently decide what their priorities are in a way to hold politicians to account in an effective way, these are the things that happen. And so the Uluru Statement also calls for a voice, but this time we want it established in the Constitution. So it is protected and it is empowered by a mandate of the Australian people that it's heard. I was at Uluru, 26 May 2017. I'll tell you what, it was an incredible moment on that final of 3 days. Could have heard a pin drop in that room as 250 of us listened to the words of that statement for the first time after we'd worked on it so hard, so much passionate debate and discussion. I'm going to recite the words now, and then I'm going to ask you, as the Dirrum Festival asks you to do, to take action. We gathered at the 2017 National Constitutional Convention, coming from all points of the southern sky, make this statement from the heart. Our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander tribes were the first sovereign nations of the Australian continent and its adjacent islands, and possessed it under our own laws and customs. This our ancestors did, according to the reckoning of our culture from the creation, according to the common law from time immemorial, and according to science more than 60,000 years ago. This sovereignty is a spiritual notion, the ancestral tie between the land or Mother Nature and the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples who were born therefrom, remain attached thereto, and must one day return thither to be united with our ancestors. This link is the basis of the ownership of the soil, or better, of sovereignty. It has never been ceded or extinguished, and it coexists with the sovereignty of the Crown. How could it be otherwise? That if peoples possessed the land for 60 millennia and this sacred link disappears from world history in merely the last 200 years? With substantive constitutional change and structural reform, we believe this ancient sovereignty can shine through as a fuller expression of Australia's nationhood. Proportionately, we are the most incarcerated people on the planet. We are not an innately criminal people. Our children are aliened from their families at unprecedented rates. This cannot be because we have no love for them. And our youth languish in detention in obscene numbers. They should be our hope for the future. These dimensions of our crisis tell plainly the structural nature of our problem. This is the torment of our powerlessness. We seek constitutional reforms to empower our people and take a rightful place in our own country. When we have power over our destiny, our children will flourish, they will walk in two worlds, and their culture will be a gift to their country. We call for the establishment of a First Nations voice enshrined in the Constitution. Makarrata is the culmination of our agenda, the coming together after a struggle. It captures our aspirations for a fair and truthful relationship with the people of Australia and a better future for our children based on justice and self-determination. We seek a Makarrata Commission to supervise a process of agreement making between governments and First Nations and truth-telling about our history. In 1967, we were counted. In 2017, we seek to be heard. We leave base camp and start our trek across this vast country. We invite you to walk with us in a movement of the Australian people for a better future. That's the Uluru Statement. So this powerful statement has moved people. That's why I bothered to recite it now. And Anthony Albanese has committed to a referendum in this term of Parliament. I just want to help you understand this. This is a once in generations opportunity, not a once in a generation opportunity, a once in generations opportunity. We have fought long and hard, Indigenous people, to be heard. Over and over we've been silenced. We have to have the courage to enshrine this in the Constitution, to take on a referendum and make sure we win. Please support this campaign. It's a simple proposal, and at the moment, the national debate, which is normal at this point though, there's a lot of talk about detail. Where's the detail? We want to see the detail. The only constitutional reform in this is that there will be a voice. I was at Gama on the weekend, and Albanese put forth the draft words. 3 sentences basically that recognise Indigenous people for the special place we have in this country. That's all it is. And a very simple question. Basically, do you support Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people having a voice in the Constitution? The ACT needs to vote yes. And this school, you people, you good people, please join the Yes campaign and start now. Thank you.